Before getting into the video, I wanted to just make a quick programming announcement. My intention was to cover multiple chapters in this episode as I'm a bit further along in my playthrough at this point. That being said, there is just so much that happens in Chapter 3 and so much more to say about it all that I really see no other way than to devote the entirety of this episode to Chapter 3. We will pick up with Chapters 4 and hopefully 5 in the next companion episode. Anyway, let's get into it. Still hot on her sister's trail, Mio enters Kurosawa Mansion for the first time. Series fans would do well to recognize the famous Kurosawa name, a name that belongs to both Yae and Sae from this game, Rei, the main protagonist of the third game, and Hisoka Kurosawa from the fifth entry, Maiden of Black Water, just to name a few really important ones. Though we never get explicit confirmation regarding Rei's or Hisoka's ties to the Kurosawa family line, it's at least significant that both bear the Kurosawa name and wind up entangled in the various rituals at the center of their respective games. If not blood-related, they are at least spiritual inheritors of all this haunting shit. And how could we not also add Miku and Mafuyu to the list, given that Yae Kurosawa, one of the principal ghosts in this game, is their great-grandmother? Though they may not share the same last name, the protagonist from the OG Fatal Frame and her brother are, in fact, Kurosawas. But let's get back on track. Crimson Butterfly focuses on the lives and deaths of two bona fide Kurosawas, Yae and Sae, who were selected to be the twin shrine maidens for the Crimson Sacrifice Ritual, a ground-purifying ritual native to All Gods Village. Now, by this point we should have some idea regarding how things turned out during that ritual. I mean, All Gods Village was completely wiped off the map. The deserted town is filled with spoopy ghosties, and Sae's spirit is wandering around in a white bloodstained kimono laughing maniacally, the adorable minx. And on top of all that, Sae, with the help of some very persuasive Crimson Butterflies, has led Mio's sister to the Kurosawa mansion, and as a result, Mio as well. Right after the opening cutscene of Chapter 3, a ghost appears in the Kurosawa mansion entrance hall and says, "The twins that will become the sacrifice have returned." There are at least two interpretations absolutely at play here. First and foremost, the ghost is referring to Yae and Sae. We know that the ghosts here are trapped in some kind of stasis, as evidenced by Itsuki Tachibana's behavior in Chapter 2. When Mio walks by the storehouse, he calls out to her, but more to the point, he calls her Yae. His consciousness is trapped, doomed to repeat the events of that fateful night when he aided in Yae's escape from All Gods Village, a decision that would be instrumental in bringing about the repentance, the calamity that wiped the village off the map, as well as leading Yae into the arms of Ryozo Munakata and into the jaws of the calamity that took place at Himuro Mansion. So we know on the surface that this line refers to the original events and people relevant to the repentance. But, like any horrifyingly effective haunt, the past and the present are blurred and inextricably entangled with one another. While the twins that become the sacrifice have returned undoubtedly refers to Yae and Sae Kurosawa, it also now refers to Mayu and Mio Amakura, both simultaneously and distinctly. My wording here is painstakingly intentional. Mio and Mayu are mirrors for Yae and Sae, respectively, superimposed over the former twin shrine maidens, inevitably harkening back to the original wound that has been left to fester and cause a powerful nexus of restless souls. We know this is a device the writers use, given that a similar mirroring happens between Miyuki Hinasaki, Miku's and Mafuyu's mother, and Yae Munakata, née Kurosawa. The resonance is created by the superimposing get at the horrifyingly inescapable cyclical nature of a haunting in such beautiful and compelling ways. But the even more horrifying truth for our twin protagonists is that Mio and Mayu are now stand-ins for Yae and Sae. The ritual burden has been transferred from one set of twins to another, and the events of that fateful night have been set in motion once again, and they will not stop until the ritual has been completed. This is true horror. Mio can learn all she wants about what the fuck is going on, but that knowledge amounts to precious little. She and her sister are the perpetuation incarnate of the vicious cycle set in motion by Yae and Sae all those years ago. I don't know about y'all, but I've got chills. But wait, there's more. Almost immediately after our ghost friend welcomes us with that extremely weighty opening line, we get another equally hefty boy. Quote, "The Kusabi is coming." We will hear this line, as well as "the Kusabi has returned," again and again during this chapter's ghost battles as we get closer to the truth. But just who or what is the Kusabi? And what does that have to do with Yae and Sae and the Crimson Sacrifice ritual? Well, we won't have to venture too much farther in order to begin to figure all that out. As soon as we attempt to leave the entrance hall, we see a flashback of Mayu's forward progress through the mansion. As she makes her way deeper inside, frightened spirits start running toward her, and more importantly, away from someone or something. As Mayu, we then enter a room and approach a young woman in a blood-stained white kimono, surrounded by crimson butterflies. Once Mayu reaches this woman, we flash back to Mio. When it's Mio's turn to enter that room, all that remains is some fluorite on the ground. Upon playing it in the Spirit Stone radio, we learn it contains words spoken by Sae to Yae. She says, quote, "We promised that we would always be together." This should eerily remind us of the opening cutscene between Mio and Mayu, as these are the exact words spoken there. In a masterful writerly move, we see a parallel between Mio's abandonment of Mayu that resulted in the latter's permanent foot injury, and Yae's abandonment of Sae in the Crimson Sacrifice ritual. I would argue that the wound of abandonment that has been left to fester in Mayu's heart is part of the reason why she is so much more susceptible to Sae's malicious influence than Mio is. Given that the accident takes place in the forest outside of what was once All Gods Village, it's clear that this event, rather than being mere coincidence, is a literary device that establishes Mio and Mayu as mirrors of Yae and Sae respectively. This fateful accident produces a resonance that allows Mio and Mayu to become properly attuned to take on their roles as the hapless heirs of the Kurosawa twins' ritual burden. To further bolster the validity of this reading, a cutscene immediately follows in which Sae actually appears before Mio. Sae's white kimono is stained crimson with blood, and there are dead bodies all around her. She laughs maniacally. All of this is pretty terrifying in and of itself, but then we see the outline of a figure behind her begin to materialize and take form. The spirit is none other than the Kusabi, a term about which we will learn much more in Chapter 4. For now, suffice it to say that the Kusabi is a stand-in for the missing Yae, which tells us that the ritual took place as planned despite Yae's absence, and based on the vibe from this cutscene, this did not go well. A devastating calamity as a direct result of the failed ritual takes place, much like in the first Fatal Frame, and our protagonists wind up assuming the responsibility of working within the confines of the ritual practice in order to make things right. So now we have a better, albeit still vague, idea of who or what the Kusabi is, and that's just about all the elucidation we will receive on this subject in Chapter 3, but we will learn more in Chapter 4. I will say it's no accident that this chapter that emphasizes the Kusabi also introduces in its visions the coming of the folklorist Seijiro Makabe and a young Ryozo Munakata. But we'll save the conclusions we can and should draw from that juxtaposition for the next episode. So for now, let's discuss what else we learned from Chapter 3. Based on Makabe's writings, we learned that the Crimson Sacrifice ritual is most likely a ground-purifying ritual. Folklorist 3 mentions that as a result of the Tachibana twins' failed ritual, the villagers all seem to have a sense of impending doom and that there are many earthquakes. In response to all of this, Makabe notes that, quote, "The village is quite fearful of the earth's fury." So, through Makabe's writings, we get an idea of the forbidden Crimson Sacrifice ritual's intended purpose, which seems to be to ward off natural disasters like earthquakes. But as we see more visions and unearth, pun intended, more documents, we will discover that these earthquakes are actually a symptom of what's really going on. The Twin Shrine Maidens actually perform this crucial ritual in order to keep the Hell Gate closed and prevent the repentance from taking place. Now let's get back to the series of events. As Mio, we then make our way to a room known only as the Flickering Room, which just has "oh fuck no" written all over it. There is a locked door at one end of this room, and upon taking a spirit photograph of it, a woman's voice can be heard saying something about wanting to stay with her sister. This seems to be a reference to Yae and Sae. Finally, toward the end of Chapter 3, we see a cutscene of Seijiro Makabe and young Ryozo Munakata meeting with the Kurosawas, including a young Yae and Sae. They are there in the first place because Munakata is worried about the Tachibana twins, with whom he is friends. The last page of Folklorist 4 states, "The whereabouts of Munakata's friends, the twin boys Itsuki and Mutsuki, are unknown," which is a little troubling. Now, while Munakata's concern may be genuine, based on what Makabe writes next, it is more likely that he just wants to find the boys in order to probe them for more information on the forbidden ritual. In fact, Makabe is fascinated by the ritualistic practices of All Gods Village and wants to do some research with the camera obscura and spirit stone radio he borrowed from the illustrious Dr. Kunihiko Aso. In fact, he wants to take pictures of Yae and Sae as well as the Hellish Abyss, which ends up having drastic consequences for the folklorist. The cutscene featuring Makabe also has flashes of a bound body being thrown into the depths of a pit, which we should absolutely connect to Makabe, from whose perspective this cutscene plays out. but I'll save the significance of this for a future episode. During this fateful encounter depicted in the cutscene, we hear Makabe speak the lines, quote, "The ritual that cannot be spoken about, and the place that mustn't be seen." This very important line refers to the fact that the Crimson Sacrifice ritual actually has two versions, a public-facing one and a secret, forbidden one, a fact that Folklorist 4 confirms. The secret version of the ritual only becomes necessary when the more public-facing version is not enough to appease the restless souls and keep the Hell Gate closed. The latter part of that line, "the place that mustn't be seen," then refers to the Hellish Abyss. The Tachibana's ritual failed, which necessitated Yae's and Sai's involvement in the secret ritual. Having just been through it himself, Itsuki Tachibana feels for Yae and Sai, resolving to help them escape their fate by any means necessary. Before I continue on, I think it's important here to highlight the parallel to Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, which has a similar mechanic going on there with the tourist-friendly ritual performance and the secretive one that the doctors Hibara attempted to revive in order to cure Sakuya Hibara's Moonlight Syndrome. Again, the parallels are what make this series so strong and compelling overall, so I point them out any chance I get. Continuing on in Folklorist 4, we happen upon the following line, quote, "If all the ceremonies fail, the gate to hell will open, the dead will pour out, and the sky will go dark." This sounds familiar. All of this amounts to what is referred to as the repentance, which we learned did come to pass. The final cutscene of Chapter 3 happens when Mio enters the room with the doll display. Behind a curtain, she spies the silhouette of a young girl seemingly talking to something she is holding. The figure says the fateful line, quote, "We promised we would always be together." But then she goes on to say, "So we ran away, but everyone died." These lines reveal that Yae and Sai initially ran away together with the aid of Itsuki Tachibana. Through various documents, we know that Sai did return alone to try to perform the ritual without her crucial counterpart. When she peeks behind the curtain, Mio finds her sister Mayu not leaning over something and whispering to it, but instead unconscious on the floor. Up to this point, we have seen Mayu influenced by Sai primarily in the form of being led along as if in a trance. This beautifully haunting scene solidifies the notion that Sai has taken over, at least partially, Mayu's waking mind. It is significant in the construction of the scene that Sai's silhouette speaks, is sitting up, and is animated behind the screen, whereas Mayu's corporeal form is unconscious and lying prone. Further confirmation of this possession comes from what Mayu says when she is roused awake by her sister. "Someone was calling me, telling me to come back and perform the ritual again." To our knowledge, Mayu has never taken part in this ritual, but Sai has. As stated above, hers is the silhouette we see on the folding screen, not Mayu's. Though Mio only encounters Mayu on the other side of the screen, rest assured, Sai is present as well. This is further proof of the fact that Mayu and Mio are the fulfillment of the ritual obligation that was not satisfied in the ritual Yae chose to abandon. As the events of Chapter 4 play out, in which Mio is finally reunited with her long-absent sister, we will quickly come to realize by Mayu's words and actions that someone else is in there, and she will stop at nothing to ensure the ritual does not fail this time around. That will do it for this companion episode. We will pick up with Chapters 4 and 5 in the next one, so look out for that episode around the time Part 5 of my playthrough drops. Until then, peace.